The World Cup sells one promise above all others, that the whole world is invited. But try telling that to the supporters who bought tickets, booked flights, cleared time off work, and still never made it through the door. Because FIFA's nightmare right now is not just empty seats, not just ticket prices, not just one bad headline. It is something much worse. A tournament that keeps saying everyone is welcome, while real fans are being filtered out country by country, visa by visa, checkpoint by checkpoint. The World Cup is supposed to be the one tournament where borders feel smaller. That is the whole mythology of it. One game, one stage, 1 month, when the planet is meant to squeeze into the same story. FIFA has sold that image for years. Unity, access, celebration, inclusion. Millions of fans crossing continents, flags everywhere, languages everywhere. The feeling that football has temporarily turned the world into one giant city. That is the promise. And right now, that promise is colliding head-on with reality, because the story emerging around this World Cup is not just about who qualifies, it is about who is actually allowed to show up. And the list of people being blocked, delayed, denied, screened, or quietly pushed out is getting too long to dismiss as a few isolated cases. There is no verified official FIFA document called a blacklist. But if you are a fan sitting at home with a rejected visa, a canceled plan, a dead ticket allocation, or a vague message about vetting concerns, it probably does not matter what the system is called. To you, it feels like the same thing, the biggest tournament in the world, and somehow you are not welcome in it. And what makes this so damaging for FIFA is that the governing body said the exact opposite. Gianni Infantino publicly insisted that everyone will be welcome in Canada, Mexico, and the United States for the World Cup. He said FIFA was working with governments to make the process smooth. He said countries that qualified would be able to come with their fans. He even said there was a commitment from the US government to ensure the process would be smooth so that fans from all over the world would be welcome. That is not a vague aspiration. That is a direct public assurance. And then reality started stacking up against it. The BBC reported that fans from more than a quarter of the countries taking part in the World Cup are facing travel bans, tighter restrictions, or high visa rejection rates. Their analysis found that 11 of the 48 qualified countries have general U.S. visa rejection rates above 40%. The recommended U.S. visitor visa for fans costs $185, requires an in-person interview, and applicants must prove they intend to leave the country afterward and can pay all costs of the trip. Even then, a visa is not a guarantee of entry. Border officials can still turn you away. That is not the image of a frictionless global celebration. That is a maze, and the countries affected are not random footnotes. According to the BBC and NPR, countries on full or partial U.S. travel restriction lists include Iran, Haiti, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. All countries connected to this World Cup. NPR reported that 39 countries were under either a full or partial U.S. travel ban, and for 19 of them, the State Department had suspended issuing all visas. Again, whether you call that a blacklist, a ban list, or a vetting net, the effect is the same for ordinary supporters. Whole categories of fans are being told in one way or another that this World Cup is not really built for them. And the examples are brutal because they turn policy into people. The BBC told the story of Abdullah Adnan, an Iraqi fan who could not even complete the normal process because routine U.S. consular services in Iraq were suspended. He traveled to Jordan for an appointment only to be told that because he was not a Jordanian citizen, that embassy could not give him a visa. Think about how absurd that is from a fan's point of view. You are willing to travel to another country just to get permission to travel to the host country of the World Cup, and even then the system slams shut. Another fan figure, Abu Qas, head of the Jordanian Football Fan Association, said he brought more than 42 documents to his visa appointment and was still rejected. His conclusion was brutal. This World Cup is not ours. That is the kind of quote that sticks because it captures the emotional truth of the whole mess. The same BBC report quotes Julian Quadio Adonis from Ivory Coast's Fan Association, saying the restrictions amount to a form of segregation that doesn't dare speak its name. That is not neutral language. That is the language of people who feel they are being sorted out before the tournament even starts. And whether you agree with the wording or not, it tells you exactly how these fans are experiencing the event, not as invited guests, but as people being screened out. Then NPR added another layer, and this is where the story becomes impossible for FIFA to wave away. NPR reported that at least one referee from Somalia and one Iraqi team staff member were denied entry at U.S. airports, and that dozens of Moroccan fans had been denied travel visas despite being ticket holders. Read that again, not just nameless supporters on the margins, but accredited people attached to the tournament itself were getting caught in the same system. When it gets to that point, it stops looking like unfortunate bureaucracy and starts looking like a structural failure. The Somali referee case alone is a disaster for the image of the tournament. Reuters and NPR both reported that Omar Abdulkadir Artan, who was set to become the first Somali referee to officiate at a World Cup, was denied entry into the United States. Reuters later reported that the Trump administration said Artan was denied because of links to suspected members of terror organizations, while FIFA committed to paying his full tournament fee even though he would take no part. Think about what that says visually and symbolically. FIFA appoints a World Cup referee, the referee boards the plane, arrives, and the host country turns him back. If even a FIFA-selected official cannot get through cleanly, what do you think that does to the confidence of regular fans? And it did not stop there. NPR also reported that an Iraqi team photographer was denied entry after vetting concerns, while a player was questioned for hours. Iran's situation became even more surreal. According to NPR and Reuters, visas for all Iranian players were eventually issued only 10 days before their first match, but several support staff members were still denied, including senior federation figures. Iran's team had to relocate its base to Mexico, and Reuters reported that Iran's Football Federation then said its 8% ticket allocation had been pulled just days before the World Cup started, leaving supporters who had already made plans unable to attend their team's matches. That last detail matters enormously because now we are not just talking about visas in the abstract. We are talking about fans who followed the official process, expected access through their federation's quota, and then watched that access disappear. Reuters said Iran's federation argued that many supporters had already made the necessary plans and that depriving them of their official allocation was contrary to equality among participating countries. FIFA responded by saying it was working with the Iranian Federation to identify compliant solutions that would maximize opportunities for Iranian supporters to attend matches. But by then, the damage was already done. Once supporters hear that even their official ticket stream can be disrupted this close to kickoff, it starts to feel less like a world event and more like a locked club. And here's where FIFA's nightmare gets even worse. You can see the consequences in the stands. Reuters reported on Senegal's opening match against France that many of Senegal's supporters were unable to make the trip to the United States, forcing immigrants and international supporters already in America to step in and make noise for them. One fan living in Brooklyn said it was disheartening to see how citizens of the world had been treated. Another supporter explained that a friend in Senegal had won a ticket through FIFA's lottery system and still could not make it because he did not get a visa. That is the kind of detail that destroys the clean official narrative, because now the fans kept out are not hypothetical. They had tickets, they had plans, and they still stayed home. That turns the atmosphere issue into something bigger than atmosphere. It turns it into evidence, because when a World Cup crowd looks thin, there are always excuses available. Maybe it is kickoff time, maybe it is transport, maybe it is pricing, maybe it is corporate allocations, but when you combine visible fan absence with public reports of denied visas, travel bans, pulled ticket allocations, and case-by-case refusals, those empty patches stop feeling random. They start to look like the physical shape of exclusion, and the commercial side of this is starting to crack too. Reuters reported that the traditional World Cup travel surge had not materialized the way hotels and airlines expected. Hotels in host cities cut rates. Flight bookings from Europe into most host cities for June and July were down on average, and bookings into New York for the final had plunged sharply year over year. Reuters directly cited costs, visa hurdles, and logistics as deterrents. Fans from more than half the qualified countries need visas to enter the United States, and all of that uncertainty lands on top of already sky-high prices. So this is no longer just a moral problem. It is an atmosphere problem, a trust problem, and increasingly a business problem, and rights groups saw this coming. Back in March, Reuters reported that the Sport and Rights Alliance urged FIFA to ensure the 2026 World Cup upheld commitments to inclusivity and safety. Their warning was blunt: football brings the world together, but not if visa bans and mass deportation raids keep immigrants, workers, journalists, communities, and fans away. The coalition said FIFA had promised a safe, welcoming, and inclusive competition under its human rights framework, but that U.S. immigration policies risked creating fear among fans and media. That was before some of the biggest controversies had even fully unfolded. Reuters later described the mood even more sharply, saying the World Cup's vibes are off. That sounds soft until you read why. The report pointed to skyrocketing prices, hotels, and U.S. immigration policy affecting players, fans, and even FIFA officials. It said rights groups had raised concerns over the safety of journalists and fans, accusing FIFA of allowing a distinctively dangerous climate of fear. That phrase matters because it changes the story from isolated inconvenience to systemic anxiety. It means the problem is not just who got denied, it is that entire groups of people now approach this World Cup assuming risk, scrutiny, and instability. Now, to be fair, this is the point where the other side makes its argument. Host governments control borders. Host governments control visas. Host governments decide admissibility. FIFA is not a sovereign state. That part is true. NPR quoted FIFA saying it is not involved in host country immigration processes, including visa adjudications, and that governments ultimately determine who receives a visa and who is admitted. Infantino himself said FIFA is not the kings of the world who can rule over governments and police forces. On the narrow legal point, that is correct. FIFA cannot simply order a border agent to wave someone through, but that is also exactly what makes this so damaging, because FIFA did not just sell a tournament, it sold a promise. It sold accessibility, it sold welcome, it sold smooth process, it sold the idea that qualified countries would come with their fans. And if you make that promise publicly, then hide behind "we don't control immigration the moment things go wrong," fans are going to hear that as a dodge. Not because the legal point is false, but because the emotional contract has been broken. That is why the word blacklist is catching fire around this kind of story, even when there is no verified official FIFA blacklist. Fans are trying to describe a pattern that feels organized from their side of the glass. No published master list, no dramatic memo, just repeated versions of the same result. You are from the wrong country. You applied in the wrong place, you brought the wrong documents, your visa is delayed, your ticket path vanished, your case triggered extra vetting, your federation's fans lost access, your official was denied entry, your support staff stayed behind, your trip is over before it began. And once people see enough of those cases in a row, they stop seeing red tape, they start seeing design. Maybe that conclusion goes too far in some individual cases. Maybe some are security decisions, some are diplomatic fallout, some are ordinary visa refusals, some are logistical failures. But here's the problem for FIFA: when the same tournament produces travel bans, denied fans, blocked officials, uncertain teams, and reduced atmosphere all at once, the audience stops separating the causes. It experiences one thing: exclusion. And that is FIFA's real nightmare. Not one scandal, not one headline, a pattern. A pattern where the fans who most need reassurance are getting the least. A pattern where those already farthest from power face the most friction. A pattern where FIFA's public language sounds global, but the lived experience of many supporters feels selective, conditional, and fragile. That is why this story matters so much. Because football can survive controversy. It always has. It can survive bad refereeing, awkward hosts, expensive tickets, and political noise. What it struggles to survive is the feeling that the world's game is no longer truly open to the world. So no, I cannot tell you there is a proven secret FIFA blacklist document. That would go beyond the evidence. But I can tell you something real, and maybe more important: enough supporters, staff, and officials have now been blocked, delayed, denied, or sidelined that the phrase makes emotional sense to people watching it happen. And when that happens to a World Cup, the damage is enormous, because the moment fans start believing this event belongs to some nations more than others, the mythology cracks. And once the mythology cracks, every empty seat, every missing drum, every absent supporter section, every thin patch of color in the stands becomes part of the same story. And that story is brutal. A World Cup that says everyone is welcome, while too many fans are learning the hard way that not everyone is. So what do you think? Is this just the unavoidable reality of border control at a giant international event? Or has the 2026 World Cup already crossed into something more dangerous? A tournament where inclusion is marketed but exclusion is lived? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want World Cup coverage that follows not just the football, but the power around it, subscribe.